Okay. So as Joa was saying, I would like to give you an overview of the different types of activities that Equids are involved in Latin America. First of all, Latin America is really big, so we have many countries, and Mexico is probably the one with the largest number of horses, mules, and donkeys from the whole area, while Chile, down here, we're probably the ones with the least number of equids. We only have around 7,000 mules in the country, 15,000 donkeys, and below 300,000 horses. So a really, really small population compared to other countries of Latin America, like Brazil, Colombia, Argentina. They have much larger populations than we have. And that is already a challenge for countries like Chile, for example, to get funding for doing projects with horses, because they're not considered productive species or of high importance or economic importance for the country. So equids are still a very important source of benefit for work in most of the countries of Latin America, but we still also see people providing energy for work, and also different types of vehicles that are being used for different activities. And these three photos are from Colombia, and they are all in the same street. So we can see how these different sources of power are mixed, and you can see them all together in the same area, doing the same type of work. Now, the types of work, we have many animals doing pack work, and we also have horses doing, and mainly horses doing draft work. We don't have those really nice draft breeds that you're used to see in Europe. I mean, we have them, but in a very, very low amount, and they're doing really specific work, but it's not what you see in the communities where they're used as their main source of income. And we find mules, donkeys, and different types of horses doing work, and different types of work in every country. Some countries prefer to use donkeys, some prefer to use horses, others mules. It really depends the environmental conditions of the country, like temperature, like the type of terrain where they're working, and the type of activity. So if we see some of the types of work that they are still doing, for example, this picture is from Nicaragua, and here horses are still used for funerals, and they have to carry this huge carriage that they were probably built for much larger breeds of horses than this ones, but today this is the type of horse that is predominant in Nicaragua. This is here in Chile. Horses are used also for religious ceremonies. This happens once every year, and it's thousands of people by horse that take the communion to people, old people or people that are sick that can't go to church. So they start really early in the morning, and they are the whole Sunday with the priest. They take the priest in the carriage, and they move him around the city. And this happens in many cities. This picture is from Colombia, and here they are using the donkeys as a library to provide access to books to children in rural areas. So that's a really nice activity that they're doing. This is in Mexico. So here they are doing the work to make the mezcal, and they have to pull this big stone in circles. So that's difficult work for horses, especially if they're doing it always in the same direction. This is also in Nicaragua, and this is a type of public bus, so people can just stop this bus and move around the city. And they also have smaller ones that work as a taxi, so you can have your private one. And you see many of this moving around the cities. This is in Guatemala, and here they are just waiting for people to ask for their service to carry things around. So sometimes you can see that they're just standing there all day until they get maybe one work, and that's their daily income. This one is the typical cart horse that we see here in Chile. And they're kind of small. They look a lot like the Chilean breed, but they're usually a mix. And here it depends the city. Like if it's in the coast, you can see them carrying seaweed. In other areas, it's sand. In the south, they do a lot of movement of wood. So they do different types they have different types of load. And these ones are the mules that the army is using here in Chile, but they are very similar to the ones that the Argentinian army is using. And they're used for pack work. They go up the Andes and they are moving different types of resources for the soldiers that are already doing different types of exercises up in the mountains. And of course, you can still see a lot of it, especially in the central area of Chile, a lot of horses doing more agricultural work. But in the south, you won't see that many horses. You will see oxen doing this type of work. Now, if we think all these equids are doing different contributions to the livelihoods of people, and they can be considered as the natural, financial, human, and social capital of their owners. And they are supporting them not only as a source of income, but they also provide transport for the family. They provide they are an important part of religious ceremonies. It gives them much more resilience when people have to confront like a natural disaster or some other problem, because they can also sell these animals if they have something that is from them and for them, and it doesn't only generate work, it can also generate milk and in some cases meat. But we also have to consider that the welfare of these horses can be a problem sometimes, but also the welfare of their families. And in this way, the one welfare concept is very important when we're talking about working equids, because we have families that their welfare depends on the horses, but the welfare of the horse also depends on the people that are taking care of them. And what we have been trying to do is to work with not only the horses, but also with their keepers. Many children go to school by horse, and the horse is part of the family. The horse, sometimes you would see it lives inside the house with the family. So it is very important to consider these bonds when we do any strategy to improve the welfare of the horses. What we have seen is that not because people have more a higher income or have access to more resource, that doesn't mean their horses are going to be in a better condition. And we did this study because many activists in Chile were asking the government to forbid the use of horses for work. And one of the things they were saying is that if people don't have money, they shouldn't have animals because they won't be able to provide for the animals. But we haven't found a relationship between having money, having resources, and horses being in good welfare. So then we moved on to see, okay, if it's not your resources, what can it be that is modifying the welfare of the horses? And we did a study where we were looking at human-animal empathy, and we did this. We used this instrument to assess empathy in over 100 cart horse owners here in Chile. And what we found is that the higher the level of human-animal empathy, the better the welfare index that we constructed was in the horses. So some people didn't have many resources, but their horses were in much better condition than other owners that did have a better income, but their horses were thin or had more lesions or other health or behavioral problems. So making this link has made us also move forward with other projects. And for example, now we are developing a video game for children of ages between 6 and 10 to support the development of human-animal empathy at school. So this is going to be an open access video game that we're going to provide to all public schools, and children can play, and they will have to be in charge of a horse and provide the horse with all their needs and take care of the horse, and the same with other animals. So we are trying to work at that level because we know children can make the difference. Usually children are the ones that have to take care of the horses. They do the grooming, they do the feeding, they do a lot of work with the horse at home. And if we can change something in them, we're probably going to be more successful to improve the welfare of horses. So some of the main challenges that we see, there are many. I'm just going to show you like a few that we can kind of group together. This is pictures in Colombia, and you can see here one of the children playing as a swing in the cart. One, and a big one, is the lack of professional farriers in many countries. For example, in Chile, we don't have a professional farrier school. In Argentina, they do. In Uruguay, they do, and in other countries. But usually, these farriers, once they've been trained, they don't want to work with working horses, and they move to sport horses, and we lose them. So this is a big issue, and we see a lot of problems with the hooves. And usually it's the same owner that tries to do the trimming and the shoeing, but they're not trained, and it makes it a circle of problems because we end up seeing things like this. 2 or 3 years ago, we did a training course for working horse owners here in Chile. We provide each owner with a set of tools so they could do the shoeing. We selected people from different parts of the country that we knew were interested in learning more about this, and that we knew could help their neighbors in shoeing and taking care of the hooves. And it was really nice because, well, all the owners were then very happy. They had their certificate, and most of these people haven't finished high school. Some of them never went to school, and the majority of them don't know how to read or write. So having something, even if it's just a piece of paper, makes them feel very, very happy. And And we think that that's the most important part of all these types of training. Feeding is also a really big problem. In some countries, the problem is the really low body condition score of horses. But then in other countries, and for example, I have seen, this one is here in Chile, but I've seen horses that are really obese in countries like Uruguay and sometimes in Argentina. And this is also a problem when this horse has to work. And what usually happens is that the horse doesn't work almost the whole week, and then they make them work with a high intensity one day, and then the next day they are calling us because the horse is sick or because the horse has a colic. So both extremes really bad, and the causes are also really different. For example, this picture is in Bolivia. One of the problems they have is that many owners just leave their horses free to walk around the city, and they don't provide enough food, and then you see horses just trying to find something to eat between the garbage. And then this one is in Nicaragua. Here you see one of the children feeding his horse, but sometimes the nutritional value of the feed is not enough to keep the horse in a good condition, especially if they are doing work, and also the conditions under which they do that work. These countries have really high temperatures and high humidity, so that also makes it difficult for the horses to keep their body condition. Harnessing is a huge problem. We see all types of harnessing systems. For example, this is in Bolivia. This is the type of harnessing that many people use to work in the city. And you can see that this is just all being repaired with little pieces of cloth, or sometimes even pieces of wire, and all this is going to make us find more and more lesions on the horse, and then they also start having behavioral problems because they don't want you to get near them, to touch them in some areas, and it gets more difficult for owners to put the harness every day, and then they think their horses are aggressive just because they want to be aggressive. So here another problem. For example, here they repaired just with a piece of wire, and then you see these lesions. Here a different system, and also you can see here the lesions, because this makes it's going to produce burns in the skin. It's very, very difficult to make them change the way they are using the horses, because, for example, in this case, the owner said, no, I have to use a wire because the horse is too aggressive and difficult. Yes, the horse is difficult because you're using a wire, you're producing pain, and the horse hasn't had a good training to do draft work. So there are a lot of problems involved, and if we don't change people, we're not going to change anything for the horse. Here are some other examples. This horse is also in Nicaragua, and this one is in Argentina, and it actually looks like a gladiator or something. And you have horses with this type of harness in really hot weather working. That also is really heavy. It's difficult to put on, and actually owners don't have an explanation. If you ask them, why are you using this type? It's usually because of tradition, and they wouldn't know how to do it different. So training is really, really important. Another problem that we have seen is the housing of horses. Most of the people that have working horses in many countries in Latin America are very poor, and they live in conditions like a slum. So here you have the horse, the cart, but this is actually the house of the family. So the horse, here they have access, they can go in and out of the house. Because many people collect garbage, so either to recycle them or to see if they can sell some pieces, for example, wood or metals or bottles. So then you go to the house and you find a lot of these things just around, which is a risk for injuries for horses. They don't want to put pictures of injuries, but you can imagine. This one is in Mexico. The same. When you have people recycling, sometimes they divide the organic from the inorganic, and then you have a mess because they use the organic part many times to feed horses, but then a lot of garbage is just moving around, and that can be a risk for the animals. We get at the hospital a lot of horses with cuts because they roll here, and they usually there can be a piece of glass or a piece of metal or something, and it becomes a problem. Another problem that we have seen with the housing is that because animals are living in close relationship with other, for example, you have horses, but the owner also has maybe a cow and a couple of pigs and chickens, and then you have rodents. Because of the type of environment with all this, and on the other hand, the environment in which these people live is really poor, so they don't have access to water, they don't have access to electricity sometimes. So it makes it like a perfect context for some diseases. And what we have seen is we took samples of horses, the other animals, and also the owners, and we have found over 6 reservoirs of Leptospira. And this is an important zoonosis, and many times when humans have it and they go to a hospital, the doctors, they don't think about it, and sometimes it can look just like a cold, and they're not thinking about or not asking the owner, where do you live? Do you live with animals? So we have a really high prevalence. In Cuba, they have also done this type of studies, and they have also found a relationship between the reservoirs of Leptospira in owners and their horses. And 2 years ago, we had equine influenza. So we decided to take samples of over 100 working horses here in Chile. And we also took samples of the dogs and the owners. And we found first a human influenza. Horses, dogs, and people were positive. And for equine influenza, we found some dogs that were positive. And there's not supposed to be this movement from horses to dogs, but we think that because they're living in these conditions, it's allowing for this virus to just move and change. So that is a high risk. In the case of Chile, until this year, it wasn't mandatory to vaccinate horses with the equine influenza vaccine. From this year, it is, but we still don't know how it's going to work. We don't have many diseases in horses in Chile, because we have the Andes, then we have the desert in the north, and then just water. We are very lucky in that sense, but I think it's also because we're not doing an active search for some diseases. For example, in Argentina, they have a lot of problems with equine anemia, and that means that the horses that are positive have to be euthanized many times. Then probably the biggest problem is trying to define who's responsible for these horses. And well, nobody wants to be responsible. So the first ones that have to be responsible are the owners or caretakers. But to be responsible, we need to train them. We need to provide them access to vets, for example, or to different types of harnessing systems and other resources that are important. We have a big problem with private equine practitioners. They don't want to work with working horses. They want to work with high performance, sport, nice and shiny horses. And it's very difficult to get them to go into the communities and work with these people. Then the other problem that we have is the local authorities. For example, each municipality, they can have their own norms or regulations about working horses. And the owner should have a driving license for horses. And most municipalities tell them that it doesn't exist because they don't want to provide it. And that makes that when a police stops them, they don't have the license and they will get a fine. Then with official veterinary authority, they are not looking at horses right now because they are not in the law, in our law, and I think it happens in many countries. They are not considered as a production or farm animal. So they just don't have norms for horses. But on the other hand, they're not considered pets. So they're kind of in this in-between black hole that leaves them without any specific regulations. So the veterinary authority is usually not looking at these animals. And then the government, for the government, it has been really difficult to understand that this huge difference between low income and high income people, and they probably don't see in their everyday life working horses. So it has been really, really, really difficult to get laws or animal protection laws for these types of animals. We have one animal protection law, but it actually excludes working horses. So it says all this law, in the case of working horses, it doesn't regulate them. So again, they are left in this kind of space in between. So most of the times, working equids depend on the non-governmental organizations. We have this international coalition for working equids composed by the Brooks, FANA, the Donkey Sanctuary, and World Horse Welfare. And they have been probably the ones that have made more change and pushed, for example, the OIE to have a strategy just for working equids. But I think every country cannot depend on non-governmental organizations. We have to somehow work in the education of vets, authorities, and the owners. You don't usually see at the university level, when you study to be a vet, they don't really teach you much about working horses. So then when you go out to work, you will probably know nothing about different harnessing types or how you should load a horse or a donkey or a mule. And usually veterinary medicine is based on horses, so you don't see the difference between donkeys and mules. And that is a huge problem. And that probably is happening in many of our countries. So I think the non-governmental organizations and the OIE are the ones that have been moving this issue forward the most. And I think this is probably, yes, the last one. It is, I think it's very, just to end, it's very difficult to make these horses visible, horses, donkeys, mules, visible for most of the people. And I think that's the point that we need to kind of change. We need to make them visible for the authorities, make visible how much they support the economy of many families, and that's the only way that we can move forward and try to maintain the welfare in a better state. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing, I think.
Thanks, Tamara. Thank you so much. First of all, it was really interesting, and it's always interesting to see the way you put things. I'm sure there are already some comments here, but I just want to like to say thanks for sharing your vision and bringing some of the results of your studies and of your publications. And it's indeed the reality you show. It's pretty much transversal to all Latin America and maybe even some areas of Europe and Asia and Africa for sure. So I'm just going. I will invite you to open the cameras if you want, so we can start the dialogue here. Eduardo, as soon as you present those initial data about empathy, Eduardo followed by Stacy. Eduardo just said, "How could you produce empathy? Is it the knowledge of the species? Which are the elements that would be fundamental for this process?" That's Eduardo's questions. Then Stacy just said,
"Always making the difficult questions."
There we go. I don't know who invites Eduardo for this. And Stacy just after that said, "I've been wondering how they actually measure it in this study. How was it defined?" So these are the first two questions about empathy.
So I'm going to kind of mix both. To start with, empathy is the capacity or ability to put ourselves in the position of others. And by doing that, it promotes some pro-social behaviors. So if I'm able to understand that you could feel pain, there's a higher probability that I will do something to alleviate that pain. So what we were trying to see is we measured both human and human-animal empathy. And we were trying to see if there was an association with a welfare index that we developed that included behavioral health and also some mental state indicators. And to answer a little bit of Eduardo's question, empathy has two big components. So it has an affective component, but it also has a cognitive component. So the affective part, it could be more difficult because it will depend on your life experience and how your family behaves with you and your everyday life. But this cognitive, the knowledge part, you can work it. So, for example, we did a study with, this is a really sad study, but we made a study with veterinary students from first year to their final year. And what we found was that the human empathy stayed almost the same, but their human-animal empathy went down. And you would think that a vet should have a higher human-animal empathy. So we were looking at the causes, and it's probably because in the curricula, they didn't have like an important course on pain or in pain management. And students are also exposed to, for example, sometimes surgeries or doing procedures, and they kind of forget that they're working with animals. And that depends a lot on teachers. So you can already assume that I had a lot of problems with the teachers from the clinical courses. So yes, you can work it, and you can teach empathy, and that's why we think that if we start working with children, we're going to have probably better results than if we start with the adults. Because children go home and then they tell their parents, no, you don't have to do it like this, because we were taught that the horse can feel pain or it's not going to be comfortable. So it can start making this change. How we measured it, there are instruments. You have the interrelationship index from Davis, which measures human-human empathy, and then there's another instrument by Paul from 2002, I think. I don't remember the exact date, which measures human-animal empathy. It's not measuring human equids, but animals in general. So first we had to do a work of translation, where you change the instrument, in this case into Spanish. Then you have to translate it again into English to see if now the two English versions are still the same. And then we had to validate both instruments. We did the validation with students, and then we also did a validation with horse owners, because some questions were, for example, in the human empathy instrument, where when you go to the opera, and horse owners haven't been to the opera, so we had to change some of the concepts to make it more realistic for them. So that provides you a score, and you work with that score. And the higher the score, the higher the empathy level. But there's the instruments don't have like a set number that you say, okay, below this, no empathy, above this, you're very empathic. No, it's just a continuum, and the higher the scores, the higher the empathy. And then what we did was we used a third instrument, which had pictures of different types of painful conditions in horses, and almost, I think all pictures were from working horses. And we asked owners to rate how much pain they thought the horse was feeling. Because most of them don't read, we had this kind of smiley faces, from a happy face to a really painful face, and they had to mark which one they thought the horse was perceiving. And then we also did a correlation between these indexes, and we found that the higher the empathy, human-animal empathy level, the higher the perception of pain, and the better the animal welfare index. And you can assume that people that are more empathic, if they see some type of injury, they have a higher probability of calling the vet to do something for that horse. While if you have a low empathy and score, and you see, for example, I don't know, a lesion maybe because of the bit, or in the shoulders of the horse, maybe you think it doesn't hurt that much, or the lesions that we saw on the nose, and then the probability of that person calling a vet or to do something to alleviate pain is lower. So that's what we did. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thanks, Tamara. Thanks a lot. Is there any, well, Stacy has to go. Vets on duty. Thanks, Stacy. Thanks for joining, and thanks for your comment. Is there any question in the room for Tamara?
I will ask a little question. Just is
go for it.
We are now in the presentation. You talk about how the owners know the relationship or the empathy they have about their animals. The consequences of that, at least is what we are having here in Europe, is that then we have a lot of people that they are against the use of working animals, because they always say that working animals then are being abused, and you always have those spectacular photographs about injuries, and that they are true is something we have to solve. But I don't know how is that perception in Latin America about the use of animals, because here, the more you are in the city, the more distant you are about the animals probably, and the perception is like any kind of use of the animals. Some people are questioning even riding them or stuff like this. So it's just to know how you see the perception. If you're doing these studies, you've got information as well about the perception of using animals for the people that they don't have the animals.
Yes. No, we haven't done it with people that don't have the animals, but we have done it with owners of different areas of the country. For example, we measured we assessed the perception of owners in the Araucanía, where the Mapuche communities are, which would be the native people. And we also measured the perception of owners that live in more urban areas and big cities like Santiago. So we compared their perception, and the perception about the horse was kind of different in the way that people in the Araucanía also saw their horses as a working tool, and a working tool that meant that they could have their daily bread on the table. So while in the more urban areas, we found that they looked at their horses more like a hobby, like something extra they do for money. Some people have other like really small jobs that they do here and there, but they have, yes, a different conception of the horse. But in both cases, they perceive their horses as part of their family. So in both cases, they would say, it's like a son for me, it's like it's part of my family. They really have a really the strong bond with their horses. And now we did the same perception assessment, but with the soldiers from the army that work with the mules. And the findings are really different because they don't have that emotional connection. They don't have this affective view. Only see them as a means of doing their tasks that they have to do every day. So the perception changes a lot, and I think we should do it with people that don't have horses to see how it works. But we have a huge pressure of people from the cities asking to forbid the use of equids, and it's increasing. I mean, you see vegan groups going up, and then they want to start forbidding everything that has to do with animals. And this is a really big problem. Last year in a city called Viña del Mar, which is in a little north from Santiago to the coast, they have las Victorias, which are used for tourism, these really nice carriages with horses. And activist groups were really, really pushing hard the municipalities to forbid them until they did it. They forbid the use of the horses for tourism last year, but with no strategy, with no planning of any type. And what happened was that the coronavirus pandemic came. Those people couldn't do any type of work because they couldn't get out of their houses. So they didn't have a daily income to buy the food of their horses. And then we saw some horses that were just abandoned, or some horses were sold for meat. And then the same activist groups were saying and putting on the press that how can people sell their horses for meat? And it's like, okay, this is the result of what you asked last year. So it is a problem. And I think the main problem is that there's no planning, because in the case of Colombia, they have done this transition. In big cities like Medellin and Bogota, they had a replacement program. So they provided owners with a motorized vehicle, but owners had to turn in their horses. And these horses went to kind of a sanctuary. But the government put a lot of money into the program. And they also trained owners to do other activities. In Chile, you can't do that type of replacement because to get a driver's license, you have to have a minimum level of education, which many owners don't have. So they won't be able to get access to a license. And also, I don't know if many countries can support a sanctuary for horses and for this amount of horses, because sometimes people don't understand how expensive it is to keep a horse, to maintain a horse in good condition. I think in Mexico, and Eduardo can correct me, I think some organizations were also pushing for the replacement. There's one big organization that is pushing for this in many countries in Latin America. But if there is no planning, if there is no money, no strategy, it's very difficult. It's just going to be worse for the animals, I think.
I think that takes us to that eternal discussion between regulation and just saying it's forbidden, right? And we as a fact, we saw that happening in many European countries, in many parts of the world, and with the consequences of just saying enough of doing something, the consequences are more serious, especially in terms of animal welfare and for the livelihood of the people who rely on these animals. So we believe that the solution, or part of the solution, is pretty much creating rules benefiting those who do things properly, and if they don't, that's where the education and the training program should be part of it. There's a question from Martha saying, first she said, thanks for your talk, Tamara. Could you share any of the gender dimensions you observed through your work?
Yes, we see in many Latin American countries, it's mostly men in doing the work with the horses, going out every day with the horses. And in the case of vets, it's mainly men, the vets that are working with horses. So we have a bias there. But women are the ones that take a lot of care of the animals when they are in the house. They help with the feeding, with the grooming, with those kind of activities. Here in Santiago, we have, I have a couple of my preferred owners, and they are women. And what they do is they sell different kinds of things at a market. And you can see the difference in how they treat the horses when you compare them with men. But it's mainly men. And I think it also has to do with most Latin American countries are very machistas. So we don't see that many women working with them. I don't know if in rural areas, probably you see more women. But in the city, we see mainly men working with the horses.
That takes us and linking to the next question, that is this duality between urban and rural environments, right? Jimmy from Mexico is saying, said hi and thanks for sharing. What is your opinion on where to focus empathy interventions in promoting well-being in Latin America as a priority, assuming that there are great differences between the production processes of products for human consumption in rural areas versus the service providing in urban and peri-urban areas and cities?
Yes, the first thing is that sometimes it's difficult to develop interventions because of funding and because we still have a lot of welfare issues that need to be solved for people. So and I think it's the same in Mexico and for most of the countries in Latin America. We still have a lot of human welfare problems, so we have to kind of link them so that some people don't get kind of, I don't know the word, but offended that you are taking more care of the animals than of the family. I think we need to focus the interventions of the empathy interventions in children, because with them, we're probably going to make the most changes. They are more open-minded. It's easier to show them different ways of doing things. But with older owners, sometimes it's difficult because we have owners that are 80, and if you tell them that the way they're doing it, it's not the best way to do it, or it can be done in a different way, they would just say, I don't know. First they will say, you are a woman, you don't know about horses, and then they will say, but we have done it all. My family has always done it like this, and we haven't had any problems. But not having any problems is sometimes that they don't see the problems, because maybe pain is not a problem for them, or because maybe not getting food one day is not a problem because they have to live that. So it's much more difficult to make changes. What we do is that what we're doing is we go to the owners. We first had a program where all owners came to one area in one day, and we had like a clinical service. But then we decided to go house by house, because many are neighbors, so we can work with smaller groups, and that way sometimes we just stay there all day talking to them, to the family. Sometimes we don't even see the horses, we are just talking to them, and until we see that they understand why we're trying to make the change, and that it's to make their lives easier, to make them more safe to manage a horse, because sometimes the way they handle the horse is not appropriate. So we need to show them the difference, and usually in those cases we do it the way we would do it, and in front of them, and then we show them that the horse didn't try to back up or didn't try to bite, and that it's not necessary to always get them from an ear or use something to have them still when you want to do a procedure. So I think empathy interventions mostly with children, and that means working with the municipality or working with the school in the area. And then with the owners, it's more, I think, a face-to-face conversation, and not that they don't feel the pressure that you want them to do something in another way, but sometimes you can just facilitate that they think it comes from them. So kind of that kind of human behavior change process.
Thanks, Tamara. Is there any other question in the room? Leanne, I was waiting for your question. I have to be honest.
Hi, Tamara. Thank you.
I could see it in your face.
I was just waiting. So it's really great talk, and really good to hear you sort of highlight those challenges. I think the one welfare kind of idea is really great. It's more and the idea of trying to bring in human benefits and also environmental as well. So kind of getting ecologists or something involved in those kinds of things. I just wondered if if you could tell us a bit more about your ideas about how you can fit those three things in, or if you've done some projects where you maybe, I don't know, get kind of human health people involved, or where you would go with that, basically.
Well, when we were doing the study of Leptospira and influenza, it was a small project that I had. One day, talking with a friend that is a virologist, he said, well, maybe we can do part of your project inside of my project that was with human health, and that way we could get the consents and everything to take samples from people, because I can't take samples of people, I can only take the samples from horses. So we made this multidisciplinary group, and we were looking at the animals, but also the environment in which they move, and why, like the epidemiology of the disease, why are these things happening. And for example, for the case of leptospira rodents, a big issue, and what we did was try to promote that owners kept their, I wouldn't call it a garden, but their backyards more cleaner, and try to make it more tidy so they didn't have so many rodents going around, or teaching them where they should be putting the food, the horses' food, and that kind of stuff. So I think we're always trying to link the three. It's difficult sometimes, but we already know that we're not going to win anything if we keep treating injuries if we don't make the change in the people, because they're just going to continue using the same harnessing, and we are going to continue treating the same wound forever until they sell the horse because it has too much pain. So we try every time to do the connection. I have also worked with a psychologist, and now I'm working with a sociologist, and because I think we need to understand that as vets we can work on one view, but we need to incorporate the other disciplines if we want to make a change. So that's mainly how I've been trying to do it. For example, now for the project with the video game, I'm working with a psychologist, but I'm also working with un pedagogo, ¿cómo se dice? A teacher. So they can help us with the learning outcomes that should be the ones for children of that age, and how to link it with the national curricula. So it's all kind of working together as one piece, and it's not like we're doing something really isolated from what they have in their own curricula. And but I didn't have it ready. I wanted to have it ready for today. We're also working with engineers. We're working on an application for an app for the Android, where it's going to be open access, and it's for people to, if they see a working, they can take a picture and they can put it in the map. So we're trying to create this map of working equids, and you can choose if it's a horse, if it's a donkey, if it's a mule. And it also has some educational information in the app, but the idea is to have like this worldwide survey, and everyone can see the map. So they can see if there are horses nearby where they are. And I think that's also going to make more visible these activities. Because, for example, I think in my sister, I live like in the middle of Santiago. My sister lives more to the north, and most working animals are in the south. My sister has never seen a working horse in Santiago, and she's been living here for the last 20 years. But I see them every day because my work is also the universities in the south. So I have to go through these places that are very low income, and I see these people every day. So people don't realize how many working animals there are, and that they are so nearby where they are. So the app, we think, is going to help everyone be more aware of these animals. But that's it. I think we need to understand that today you can't work alone. You have to work with people from other disciplines if you want to make a change. And for some people, it's really difficult to work with people from other disciplines.
Great, that sounds great. I'm a psychologist, by the way, so that works fine with the vets.
Tamara, thanks, Leanne. Thanks, Tamara. There's another comment here from Annie Anderson from the States. Hi, Tamara, thank you for this very informative discussion. I agree that working with children is the key to developing widespread empathy. Do you have any specific examples of how you've achieved this on an ongoing basis through partnerships with schools and municipalities? other examples of effective modalities and or lessons that have been adopted? Also, how do you navigate this process while being sensitive to cultural differences?
Okay, we haven't done a study until now that we're going to start with a study with the video game. And for example, for the video game, we had to make first the connection with the schools, some pilot schools that where we're going to start. And for that, we also had to talk with the teachers. And in Chile, at least, all public schools have computers. And the idea of the video game is that it has to be in the computers at school because we don't want children to be even more time behind the screen or the telephone at home. So it's part of the curricula. And we're going to assess empathy and also some knowledge about animals before we install the video game. And then after. And the video game, because we also had to think in diversity, the video game has the alternative for children that they can choose their who they want to be, their role, and like the avatar kind of thing. So they can choose if they want to be a girl, a boy, if they want to be blonde, if they want to have brown hair. They can choose also if they want to be dressed with the typical Mapuche cloth or with the Aymara cloth from the north. It has that diversity. But it also has, in terms of some, for example, if people can't read, it has audio. So they can listen to the instructions of the video game. And so we try to include almost that could be used for almost every children. And the idea, and you can play again many times because you can choose a different character and do it again and choose a different animal and see different things. So every time they play, that goes to a database where we can see how they are answering the questions, because the animals are going to be talking to them. So if the animal says, for example, if the horse tells them that he's hungry, the children need to find the proper food for a horse. Let's say hay. If they choose something that is not proper for a horse, they won't be able to continue in the game until they do it right. So we can also see how many trials they need in order to pass every mission. We say mission in the video game. And then because they choose a different animal, for example, they could choose to go through all this trip with a dog, the needs of the dog are going to be different. So again, we can evaluate if they are acquiring knowledge that is for pets or for farm animals or for equids. So that's kind of the idea. There was a project, I think almost 5 years ago, where we did look at that we only assessed the level of human-animal empathy in children, and then, but it was more focused on pets. And then we also used a tool to see if children were able to identify the body language of dogs, especially because we have a high prevalence of dog bites. And so we wanted to see if children were able to understand when a dog was upset or when the dog was telling them to keep away. So we have done interventions with children, but this is the first time that we're going to make it more systematically, like more organized and assessed.
Thanks, Tamara. That could be really interesting to see the differences, especially with the working equids with rural and urban children, to see the way they look after the animals can be a very interesting study. Is there any other question in the room? If no, Eduardo just wrote a comment before. Eduardo said, I could provide some comments about perception towards working equids in Latin America if there is space. I think this is your space. pretty much as a final comment with all your experience working in different parts of Latin America and being from Mexico, can be really interesting to share and link together with what Tamara mentioned.
Thank you, Joe. Just a quick comment in terms of the question from CESC. What we have seen, and Tamara mentioned this international movement, but also in Latin America, they call blood traction. And they try to, there's a group of organizations, to my knowledge, right, Tamara, that they're trying to ban any use of working equids basically within the urban environment. So those working equids in tourism, but also, carrying garbage and or material from the constructions. So that there has been, as you said, Tamara, substitution in Colombia and Mexico. And there's like in different parts of the world, in Guatemala, they're trying to replace that with motorcycles. But what we have seen in Mexico is that, as you said very well, Tamara, there's no strategy. They just want to replace that, take them from the view of the urban cities, and then you have this problem with the people, the humans, that the livelihoods, they depend on those equids, and also you have the problem that the future of those horses, or those donkeys and horses mainly, where they could go to a slaughterhouse, or they could be abandoned, or something else, something like that. So yes, this perception is in urban, a lot of in urban areas, says, that we have seen in Latin America, less in rural, which of course that would be more difficult to stop or ban any use of working equids in Peru, that they provide. They are key animals to provide water in dry forest in Peru, for example. Just to confirm what just Tamara said.
Thanks, Eduardo. Is there any final question or comments?
No, just I will add to the list of problems that Eduardo just mentioned. The fact of people that they are losing the principal tool for their own living. If you just remove the horses from their life and you have no other plan. But even if you have a plan and you provide a machine that replaces the use of the horses, you get the problem of what's going to happen with those horses. That's the immediate situation that, as you say, probably they're going to be slaughtered, but keeping them in a sanctuary is economically too expensive to do that. But that's not even the solution, because at the end of the day, what has happened in Europe, and that's probably what is ahead, is that most of those breeds at the end they start to be in danger of extinction, because if the animal doesn't have a use, they are not bred. So at the end, you're losing as well part of the genetical richness that you will get with different varieties in different areas adapted to those environments. So replacing them in some ways, I think, is not even a solution, because that's just in some ways like exterminating them in a nice way, if you want to call it. It's for their own goodness that you exterminate them, because you just get them out of circulation. And that's something that should be taken into account when you are planning the replacement. Even if you do that with resources and trying to do it in an organized way, you're condemning most of the animals to disappear at the end of the day. So.
And we are seeing that in many different parts of the world with many different species, right? Lack of functionality in working equids, it is a problem. We saw that in Brazil with the huge amount of animals being abandoned, because in an attempt to be modern and to provide service to poor people, different governments tried to provide motorcycles to people in rural areas. The direct result was donkeys being abandoned, causing a lot of traffic accidents, and, for example, apparently increasing the skin trade, the illegal skin trade that is affecting donkeys all over the world. So it is a complex situation, and we saw that over the last 50 years in Europe, just as you said, Cesc, with vast majority of breeds, and although we all understand that breeds is an artificial concept, those animals are in a specific region for a reason, because they were the most adapted for that climate or for that working conditions or wherever. So actually seeing this happening it's pretty much just a reflex of maybe the modern concept that we sell and we buy. Well, someone sell and we all buy right now. Leanne just wrote a comment saying we are also adding more motorbikes, etc., to cities that often already have high pollution, and that's of course a problem. Being in a, you know, first time I was in Mexico City with a good friend of mine, Mariana, I spent 8 hours in a traffic jam, and there was somehow normal, and I was getting mad, but that's the reality of these mega cities that are happening more and more in different parts of the world. Any other comments or question? Yes, Tamara?
I just wanted to add that in Chile in the 80s, the government had a program to promote the use of draft breeds. They were breeding Percheron, and to give those horses to these people so they could improve the breed. And it was terrible because these owners don't have enough money to feed a Percheron. So at the end of it, those horses were in really bad body condition, and they ended up selling them because they didn't know how to handle them. So that's why we usually see these light breeds doing this type of work in Latin America, and also like really thin skin in the case of Central America. Some are more hairy here in the south. So you see this adaptation to the different climates and environments, and that's really, really important.
Yeah, and if you look to the European countries, you see the big draft horses more in the north, you know, where grass is available for most of the year, and you see mules and donkeys in the southern European countries. You know, having bales in the barn is something quite modern. It did not used to be like that. So it's very interesting, you know, and this is something, as Cesc said, that we are losing day by day. That is, you know, this genetic heritage, and you know, it's this new concept that it's coming, that it's the agrobiodiversity, right? We're losing lots of important genetic resources. That somehow, when you talk about resilience of mountain communities, when you talk about all these kind of things, they should be interlinked. What creates resilience in a mountain area is the fact that they don't depend on external resources most of the times in most of these more isolated communities. And working equids and the type of animals they select to work with them over there, it's a reason for that. If you just put Percherons in the Andes, I'm not sure if they will survive that long, but it was a good attempt.
But and the other thing that maybe I didn't answer one part of Annie's question is that we try to be really, really sensitive with the cultural differences, and for that, every time we want to start to work with a new community, we never just go in. First, we try to find who is the leader of the community, and first we talk to that person and see if we all want to work together. So it's never just going into one community and, I don't know, providing veterinary services and then leaving the community, but we try to maybe work with less groups, but to keep it in time, because otherwise you go and it happens. For example, in Nicaragua, it's very, very usual that they will say, oh, again, a group of volunteers coming to do training of the vet students with our horses. And you come and then you leave. So we try not to do that. And for that, we try to make this good link with the whole community and work in different aspects. So even sometimes we just go to play with the children, other times we go to do clinical work, but we try not to leave them. And sometimes that has meant to talk to the priest of the community, and in other times it means talking with the leader, or with they usually have organizations within the community. We say the vecinos, juntas de vecinos, but we always try to be really careful on how we get into a community and talk to people, because we don't want anyone to be offended. And especially if we know that there is another vet maybe working there, we also first talk to the vet, because it's not that we want to, I don't know, take somebody's job or anything like that. So yes, everyone is very sensitive this year especially. So we need to be very careful with how we communicate and do things in each area of the country.
Thanks, Tamara. Well, I think it's been already 1 hour and 20 minutes. I think it was probably the longest discussion we had so far in these webinars. But for sure, you created a lot of empathy about this, Tamara. So I think that's the word for today. It's empathy. I really appreciate your time and the fact that you accept this small challenge. We ask you to explain us about this reality, and it's always nice to have other people that are from Latin America and could contribute to this. A lot of the faces here are vets or harness makers who work and share that same reality with you. Some others, being from Europe and other parts of the world, had the chance to be in Latin America and spend some time there and see that reality. What it's clear is that the challenges are immense. I think these new concepts of one welfare or one health, or different ways of telling that, as you said, Tamara, and I'm just going to quote you, alone will not get there. And I think this is the take-home message for today. We need to, the fact that you mentioned the coalition, the International Coalition for Working Equids, it's one more attempt to bring different charities who work in different parts of the world with different equids and try to do something together, especially when it's time for advocacy, or when it's time to do pressure, bringing these big organizations together. It's one more attempt to reach those decision makers that you mentioned, even if it's a local municipality or a government or an entire region like the Americas, to try to at least to show them the importance of the working equids. And then people, they will eventually decide, but if they can decide based on knowledge and based on practical information, and that's why all the studies that you did, and or the studies that some other people in this room made in the past are really, really important. So I thank you a lot for being here with us today, and I'd like to thank you all for being here. I know in some places is already late for you. So some others from Mathilde is in Australia, so she's in the future. She's already in. it's Thursday morning over there. So thank you so much. The next FECTU webinar is going to be on the 16th of December. It's a Wednesday. We'll announce soon the next guests and the next subject. As I said, in December we will be launching the FECTU YouTube channel. So the other webinars that we had in the past will be there available, and hope to see you soon on the 16th of December in the next webinar. Thank you so much. Thanks, Tamara. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Ciao, Luis.
Bye. Bye.